Well, what we learned this week is that there is a brand new constructors, and that if anyone listens to this podcast for more than 20 seconds, they're a stupid idiot. That's basically it, right?
I agree. Moving on.
Welcome to the Blatantly Biased Racing Podcast, where we're going to talk about stupid things and stupid people. How are you, idiots? How are you today, man?
I'm good. How are you, man? Season's over. Good. By the way,
I know.
24 races. We made it. Made it.
Alpine made it. P6. Yeah.
Fuck them.
Yeah. I only bring this Alpine out when we're going to complain about Alpine.
I mean, it won't be for long. I mean, they'll be called high tech, low tech, or medium tech, whatever tech is.
This hat's probably worth about as much as the team at the minute anyway. So
yeah, probably worth more.
Probably. Yeah.
Anyways, so talking about stupid idiots. What
Good
the fuck
segue.
was Max doing? Honestly, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, and I think again there are a lot of things that we should talk about. We'll also talk about the the kind of whining and bitching both Max and George did. We'll get to that.
Oh my god!
We'll get to that. Stay tuned, by the way, guys. We'll get to that. But first, let's talk about his remarks for the stewards.
Yeah, which Brundle wasn't happy about.
Yeah. What's your view on the penalty, by the way?
I think it was a fair penalty. I think the thing is, there's a couple of sides to it. First of all, I know a lot of people have been complaining about like lap 1, turn 1 penalty, out of order, that kind of thing. The problem is that generally lap 1, turn 1 is penalised for certain instances. So it's not like it's never penalised. What people are confusing is normally there is some leeway. So a racing incident is 50-50. No one is really to blame. And lap 1, turn 1, a racing incident of like 60-40 or 70-30. Sometimes they say, right, well, I mean, it was more him at fault, but, you know, it's kind of in that chaos at the start. However, usually when it is just a one-sided 100% his fault, it is still penalised regardless of lap 1, turn 1. Otherwise you just get a situation where you'll get Valtteri Bottas Hungary bowling every weekend and there's no penalties given out. So there has always been lap 1, turn 1 penalties. It's just more lenient. In this case it was just Max's fault. Even Max after the race apologised and admitted that it was his fault. So I know there's a lot of people complaining about that. You know what? Once again, though, the FIA has done to themselves, they didn't penalise Hülkenberg last week, which made everyone have a reasonable complaint about the FIA once again, which is fair.
Last week.
Remember, Hülkenberg punted off two drivers.
No, but that was a racing incident, right? They termed it a racing incident.
Sort of, yeah.
It was as well. I mean, his rear...
He lost control.
It was not in his...
Yeah.
No, I think the front of Alpine hit his rear. And he was not in the, what should we call it? The vision.
The thing is, a lot of people are using that as an example, right? I think you're probably right.
They're fucking dumb.
You're probably right that it was more of a racing incident, but I think by not even really investigating it, it does make it look bad. If you know what I mean. I think it leaves a poor taste for the FIA.
No, you're just being a Verstappen fan.
Right,
no.
Of course. Yeah. Now, as for the penalty, absolutely deserved. And for 10 seconds, I don't know why Verstappen and Verstappen fans are complaining about this 10-second thing, because literally at the start of the season, all the drivers agreed that it would no longer be a 5-second, and it would be basically 10 seconds is the default. That has been the thing all season. And what's happened is we've had a mitigating circumstance that went in Max's favour at Austin, and they're using that now as like the thing to say, oh, it should be 5 seconds. The other thing is the drivers all asked for this pre-Qatar for harsher penalties, and then after Qatar, once again, they asked for harsher penalties. So they've all of the drivers, I think bar one, which everyone is assuming is Max, have pushed. I don't know if it is. It probably isn't.
He's not. He said he wasn't the one.
Yeah, so it probably isn't. And to be fair, if it was Max, he would just say it was him. So it probably isn't then. So if Max says something, I tend to agree that is exactly what Max did or how he feels. Because to be fair to Max, he doesn't really bullshit like some of the other drivers does. He does tend to just say what he's thinking. But yeah, the drivers all agreed on these harsher penalties. So I don't know. Fans being fans as always, when something doesn't go their way, it's a travesty, corruption and bias. And when it does go their way, it's just rules being perfectly implemented. Max deserved a penalty there, though. You cannot just throw your car up the inside like that when there's no room and you're not entitled to it and think you'll get away with it. So, penalty deserved.
What about the conspiracy theory that he did it because he was trying to favor McLaren, favor Ferrari in some way?
Nah, I don't think he's thinking like that. I think Max just goes for it when he goes for it. That's just who he is. You know what the thing is as well? I will say one thing, which is...
I was even hesitating asking that question because there's no...
You know what the answer is going to be, yeah.
By the way, Ted Kravitz actually suggested that.
Oh, lovely. Of course he did.
And you expected him to suggest that. Out of all people, if I just said that there is an F1 pundit who actually suggested something like this, the first name that would come to your mind is going to be Ted Kravitz.
Of course, yeah.
And there's this gif that goes on. That's why they hate you.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's why they hate you.
Yeah.
That's why they say British bias, because you cannot stop doing these kind of things.
This is the thing, like Brundle...
Utter lunacy.
I think the thing is, there's Verstappen fans that are annoyed at Brundle after the comments this weekend, but there's also the thing that I like about Brundle.
Which comments?
He basically went on a rant saying what was Max doing there, like that move was never on, and he was like, the way he's reacting, and then when he said 20 seconds, stupid idiots or whatever, Brundle said, you can't talk about the referees that way, like that's not a champion mentality, he went on this rant. The reason I like the way Brundle talks is because constantly, essentially all fan bases are angry at Brundle, which tells me that Brundle is basically saying what he thinks and talking the truth and not talking biased. Because I've seen Hamilton fans annoyed at Brundle, I've seen George fans annoyed at Brundle, I've seen Max fans annoyed at Brundle, I've seen
George
Perez fans. Yeah, there's like 5 or 6 of them. I think they have a group. Yeah. But yeah, look, I think Brundle was right. Like
the 2 of them that are on this pod.
Yeah. But yeah, so Max, I don't know. I do think Max probably needs to. He won't, but I think maybe for next season, I this is going to piss off Verstappen fans.
Wait. Let's not jump to that. I think first of all,
yeah. What did you think of the penalty? Sorry.
Yeah. So, the first thing was, I think there was one thing very clear. Max was just going for it. Mm-hmm. He didn't. He everything was sealed. The championship is done, and he doesn't really give a fuck.
Yep.
There was pace that he could have maybe managed the race and won even. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if he would have done that. Because the thing is, if he jumped Oscar at that point, he had the straight line speed to jump the McLaren at the long straights. He had that. Mm-hmm. It didn't pay off and okay, fine. It didn't work out. All right. It's just I think even Michael had that, and I think David Coulthard has actually talked about it, that you can show him, you can give him reason that XYZ things have happened and this is the conclusion, and the conclusion is that you're wrong.
Yeah.
And he'll just turn around and say, no, I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And I see those traits with Max as well.
And we both love those traits. We've talked about this. Yeah.
I mean, when he said stupid idiots, first I chuckled. But first of all, I'm very, very, very happy that FIA didn't do the FIA thing where they already have given him a community service. If this started again, saying that you should not be abusing the stewards or stuff like that, you should not be disrespecting them. Look, if that is something, then you should not put the mics on their faces while they're driving at 300 km per hour. Honestly, they should not have that. I honestly think after the race, if he was honest, he would have said that, okay, that was a mistake from my side. He wasn't, and he said that I don't know how the rules work, why I'm penalized by this much and stuff like this. He's being a bit disingenuous because he will never admit his mistake. No, and he knows he was at fault because he apologized. Yeah. He apologized to Piastri, so he knows he's at fault. Otherwise, he wouldn't apologize to Piastri. He would. Exactly. Yeah. 8 penalty points. Going into a new season, a season where it's going to be tight. Yeah. And a season where, again, the kind of antics he pulled in Mexico and stuff like that, if he wants to pull those, you need some in the bank. See, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, you can't do something like that. You really cannot put yourself at a disadvantage going into a new season. And again, Max has shown that he's still capable of those hot-headed moments that can harm him in the long run. I mean, he learns from it and bounces back.
Yeah.
But going into a season with 8 penalty points, and the first one that will expire, it will be in October.
Yeah.
So there's a 10-month period.
It's the whole season.
That's counterproductive. You should not. You have to keep this in mind, because look, precedence has already been set. Magnussen has been penalized.
Mm-hmm.
So really, there's no way out. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think this is the downside, isn't it? To the one thing that Max has for him that we've been so impressed by and said is like Schumacher-esque, is that he just maximizes every single weekend and he doesn't care. Like, he shows up every weekend. He never has an off weekend. That's just not who he is. And like that lunge on Piastri, I don't think there's anyone who's like, oh well, it's because of McLaren. It's like, no, like that's just who Max is.
He wanted to win. He knew that was his opportunity, and I would not have been surprised if he got the jump on Norris as well. He would have managed the race from there.
Yeah.
When we saw even Gasly keep George behind for a long time.
Yep. So he could have won. So he was just going for it. But there's the downside to that attitude, which is where Lewis Hamilton has shone for a long time, which is Hamilton thought about an entire season, so he would think that way. Max doesn't, and this is the downside to that, which is if you're just focused on one race weekend, then things like the penalty points you don't worry about. You're just focused on your race weekend. And as you said, if he gets a race ban next year, which they'll have no excuse not to give now, as you said, because they otherwise, what is it?
Kevin Magnussen has been given already, and you have set the precedent.
So that's going to be that now. I don't know. The thing I was going to say about 2025 as well that he needs to be careful of is he has made it very clear that he's just going to put his car where he sees a space and he's going to go for it, right? And he's made this clear for a long time now, but he's continuing to do it. He hasn't changed this style, and nor will he, I don't think. He definitely don't. Actually, he won't. Put it up the inside and not think about, okay, I could back off here, take him on the straight, continue on. He just saw the gap and he went for it, right? Which is great. Love that about Max. But what he needs to be careful of is the conversation was, did Piastri see him? I think the conversation is, does
that
Piastri...
should not even be a conversation.
No, but the conversation should be, does Piastri care? Because in reality, what I've seen from Piastri this season is, even if Piastri saw him, Piastri, like Max, is the type of driver to go, well, I don't care. I don't owe you any space, so I'm going to continue to go. And if we crash, we crash. Leclerc and I think Verstappen going forward will drive a little bit differently now with Piastri because of that. He'll know that going forward. And anyone who doesn't think so, look at how he drives with Leclerc compared to how he drives with Norris, for example. So Max does think about these things, right? So I think he'll calculate that with Piastri. The reason I say it could be an issue for him is I think Norris after this season will be a little bit less willing to give any room because he knows that's what lost him. And people can bash Norris as much as they want. I've seen a Norris who does learn from his mistakes this year, who has gotten better. And I think over the off-season, he will think to himself, I'm not letting him get in my head at all. So if at the opening race we are lined up together and he wants to force me off track, he can force me off track and be penalised for it. I think that's how it's going to be. And then you've got George Russell, who's not going to give him room anymore at all. Like, we'll talk about that later.
He never does.
Wouldn't have, but, he's been at the disadvantage of not having a car to race. Whereas, look at George's race starts in the past. Like, look at Spain, was it earlier this year or last year? No, 2022, this year as well. Like, George in Brazil. George gets really good starts. He's really aggressive. My whole point in this is the pool of drivers who are willing to allow Max to push them is really becoming quite small. And at the front, it's basically non-existent for 2025. And that has been fine for him or for Verstappen over the last 2 seasons or so, because he's always had the advantage of the faster car, or at this season, for example, a big advantage where if there's a crash, it favours him anyway. Yeah. That's not going to exist in 2025. And I think he may need to kind of reassess the way he's going about it, because not only is he going to have a situation where the other drivers could be in cars just as quick as his from the start, he also has a penalty point disadvantage. and the other drivers are probably not going to play his game anymore, which means if he tries these things, he's going to end up with penalty points, crashes. It's going to add up quickly, and that could lose him a title next year.
It's all going to add up. I think the biggest problem is 8 points mean one collision similar to what Bottas had with the Magnussen. You get 3 points. Then you're just that 1 point can be a simple VSC infringement.
Yep.
It won't be anything big and you'll be gone. And VSC infringement was something that he had, and it wasn't it was 0.02 kilometers per hour that he was quicker or slow or something.
Yep.
That's not much, but the margins are so small. And what he's done is he's put himself on the back foot in a season where he wants. Ideally, he would have to replicate what he did this year and hope that Red Bull continues to stay on the path, because only then he'll win the title.
Well, I mean, look, even if we're talking about a situation where he does everything else perfectly, right? If he continues to drive like that, what's going to happen is it looks very, very likely that we could have 4 teams that have similarly paced cars, because the only team of that top 4 that I'm skeptical of at the moment of not having a car that will be on the pace is Mercedes. So it's either 3 or 4 teams are going to be fighting each other. And Max is also at another disadvantage, which is McLaren didn't have a single DNF this year, right? Which means the Mercedes, and I don't think they took an engine penalty at all this year, right? So you're talking about a Mercedes engine that is bulletproof. So if imagine next year he's in a really tight title fight.
Mercedes did not take a engine penalty.
No, the only reason they had problems with engines was because a couple of crashes. That's it.
Yeah.
So the thing is, if you go into next year where you've got George Russell, Lando Norris, who I don't care what anyone says, has gotten much better and was already a very fast driver, right? You've got McLaren, who's learned from their mistakes, and you've got a Ferrari who's on pace with possibly the best driver lineup on the grid next year, right?
Of the history.
Yeah.
One of the greatest lineups in F1 history.
Especially if they get the best side of Hamilton, right?
Yeah.
So you've got all this. Max could very much, and we've talked about this, still win in that situation, even if he's in the third fastest car, because one, Max will get priority and Red Bull will happily throw the constructors title away to help Max win, right? That's who they are. 2, Max is probably the best driver on the grid at the minute anyway. And
Red Bull as well,
and
honestly.
Red
Bull's ability to be consistently extracting everything, every race weekend, making the least mistakes, winning the crunch moments. Only Red Bull has shown the ability to do that every time. And
the problem with that is, even if they have the third fastest car, they could very much be in a fight, but it could be a very, very, very close fight. And he could be throwing away 25 points, at some weekend.
Yeah.
Just for a silly move of not sitting back, calculating and saying, right, I'll get him at the next turn, So he needs to be careful. He needs to be really careful.
Ideally, I think we'd back him to do that, back him to be more calculated. And he's shown that he can.
He can do it.
I mean, the last 2-3 years, he's shown that. It's just that when he wants to bring out that side that was there in Austin or in Austria to an extent or in Mexico, now that would be limited. Now he cannot do something on those lines because, look, these points are going to play they're going to weigh on him. I mean, he can be very he was questioned about it in the media and he said, fine, I'll take a paternity leave or something. Yeah. By the way, congratulations to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can talk about it right now, but once the season starts, once the ball starts rolling, you just cannot do that. You cannot afford any single mistake.
Max is very calculated. He's very clever. And I praised him because the Max of 2022 was very different even from the Max of 2021. He does learn, he has grown, he has become a better driver. However, we have seen that when the pressure piles on, Max can let his anger just get the better of him. And I just think, maybe we're wrong. Maybe in 2025 we'll show up and it will be a straight McLaren versus Red Bull fight, for example. And they'll have equal cars. And to be honest, in that situation, even if Norris drove as best as possible, I would expect that Red Bull will get the strategy right more often than McLaren will. So even if we took the drivers out of it for a minute, Red Bull wins that just because they'll be better in terms of strategy. But we could have an easy situation where you've got Ferrari, you've got McLaren, you've got Red Bull, and you've got Mercedes. And then it's all going to be down to who is maximizing the points the most.
Yeah.
And if he gets a race ban for a bit of anger one weekend, that's it. Like, that could be the title over
and
because
that's
of
on
that
him.
one decision.
Honestly, that's on him. And
so
exactly. And just to sum it up, he's kind of put himself on the back foot with that. You want to have a buffer of like 6 points. I think Lando is at zero penalty points right now.
Because he's British, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, that has to be it. I think it's just that why make your own life difficult? That's the whole point behind it. And again, you're going to continue to question the integrity of the stewards every time. You're going to be abusive and disrespectful. You're going to, at some point, they're going to bite back.
Look,
the marginal cases are going to go against you because you've been very disrespectful, and he has been. Honestly, he has been.
Look. At the end of the day, the thing is, if he does something that deserves a penalty, the stewards have a list of options in those penalties, and if he's coming in every single weekend and going, "These guys are idiots. They only penalise me," then eventually the stewards are going to go, "Just give them the maximum penalty." Like, because. Like, if you're just going to be...
If you're going to fuck around and find out kind of thing.
The thing is, if you're a steward and you're actually making decent decisions, but you're getting called biased by this, like, not by fans, but by an actual driver every weekend, of course, eventually you are going to just become biased because you're like, well, fuck it. They're calling us biased anyway, so might as well. Just give them the full penalty. Yeah. You know, like, and it's like there'd be nothing you can do because it's like the regulations say I can give you this, or this penalty. I gave you the harshest one. Why? That's my decision. Yeah, and there's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah.
So
exactly. You know. At the end of and they're doing this job voluntarily.
Yeah.
It's not like they're being paid the big bucks. They're nothing. They're getting a pittance. They're basically getting the flight and very, very minimal wages. So
we've talked about this. Like the thing is, if there's actual bias, fine. But I think we talked about, like, in Mexico, everyone was calling Johnny Herbert out for bias, and I'm like, neither of us like Johnny Herbert. We think we made that very, very clear. But it's also like, no, this is just the rules were applied as the rules were set out in Austin, and we called it. We were like, this is going to come back on you if you don't fight against these rules, and it did. And everyone's like, oh, it's bias. Yeah,
I mean, that period, that 1 week period is so hilarious for me. I mean,
really funny.
It will always be. I mean, always come back to it because we shouted like anything that these rules are stupid. No one agreed. Within a week, karma came back to bite. But
and then instead of accepting that, it was like, oh, why was it 5 seconds last week and 10 seconds? It's just like, oh, just shut up now. Go away. Anyway, let's move on.